The sun was bright over the academy field that morning, the air filled with music and cheers as proud families gathered for graduation day. Rows of folding chairs lined the lawn, filled with people waving cameras and holding flowers. Among them sat Marcus, a tall, quiet man with a clean-shaven head and a posture that spoke of years in uniform. He wasn't dressed in his marine blues today. Just a neatly pressed shirt, polished shoes, and a small medal pinned over his heart, one that few noticed but every Marine would recognize. His hands rested on his knees, still and steady as he scanned the crowd. On the stage, his son Aaron stood among the graduates, the first in the family to earn a university degree. Marcus had seen many ceremonies before, from boot camp graduations to flag-folding honors, but this one mattered most. His boy had made it. As the ceremony began, Marcus could feel the weight of a few eyes turning his way. Some whispered, others pointed. He caught the faint, dismissive tones behind him, comments that made the air grow heavy. Did you see him? Probably here for someone else's family. Figures. Look at him sitting all proud. He didn't respond. He had learned long ago that silence was often stronger than any reply. He straightened his shoulders, his gaze fixed on Aaron, but the whispers didn't stop. A few rows ahead, someone muttered louder this time, words sharp enough to cut through the crowd. A few people laughed quietly as if it were a joke. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. Years of discipline had taught him the value of composure, even in moments that tested every ounce of restraint. Then, just as the graduates began to line up to receive their diplomas, something unexpected happened. From across the aisle, 6 men in dark suits rose quietly from their seats. Their movement was slow, deliberate. They weren't family members or staff. Their steps were in sync, steady, measured like soldiers trained to move as one. The murmurs stopped. All eyes turned as the 6 men walked down the aisle toward where Marcus sat. He looked up, and in that moment recognition flickered in his eyes. These weren't just men. They were Navy SEALs, and they were walking toward him. The moment those 6 men in dark suits began walking down the aisle, the entire graduation crowd seemed to quiet down. The sound of shoes tapping the pavement was the only thing anyone could hear. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Marcus sat still, his back straight, eyes calm, though his heart beat a little faster. Years of military service had taught him to read people by their walk, their rhythm, their stance, their silence. And the way these 6 men moved, he knew right away. These were not ordinary guests. He recognized that firm step, that quiet authority that didn't need words. They weren't there for attention or ceremony. They were there with purpose. As they reached his row, one of them, a tall man with a square jaw and a calm face, stopped right beside Marcus. The others stood behind him, shoulder to shoulder. The tall man looked down, nodded once, and said in a quiet voice, "Sir." The single word carried respect. Marcus looked up, surprised but composed. He nodded back. "Gentlemen," the whispers in the crowd turned to silence. People watched, unsure what was happening. The ones who had been whispering earlier fell quiet, their uneasy glances darting between Marcus and the 6 men who now stood like a wall of quiet strength beside him. The tall man spoke again, his tone steady and respectful. "We heard something that didn't sit right with us. Thought we'd stand with a fellow serviceman." Marcus didn't reply right away. His throat tightened slightly, but he kept his composure. He had stood through gunfire and chaos before, but this kind of moment, unexpected honor, always hit differently. He gave a slow nod. "Appreciate that," he said simply. The SEALs didn't make a show of it. They didn't raise their voices or point fingers. They simply took seats in the empty chairs around Marcus, forming a quiet circle of support. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was powerful. People who had been whispering before now looked away. A few shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The man who had made the loudest comment earlier pretended to fix his tie and stare straight ahead. Suddenly very quiet. From the stage, the announcer continued calling names, unaware of the small scene that had just changed the mood of an entire section of the audience. Marcus looked back toward the line of graduates. His son Aaron stood tall in his black gown, cap tilted slightly, a proud smile on his face as he waited for his turn. Marcus thought about the long journey that had led to this day. He remembered the long nights overseas, The days spent under the hot desert sun, writing letters to a little boy back home. He remembered coming home after years of service, trying to adjust to civilian life, to find peace after years of noise and commands. He remembered missing birthdays, missing school plays, missing moments that he could never get back. And yet through it all, Aaron had grown strong, kind, and determined. That was why Marcus was there that day, not for recognition, not for medals, but to see the result of all those quiet sacrifices. As the ceremony continued, the tall SEAL leaned slightly toward Marcus. "You served in the Corps, didn't you?" "Yes," Marcus replied. 22 years. Retired a gunnery sergeant." The SEAL nodded. "We figured. The way you carry yourself says enough." There was a quiet understanding between them. No rank needed to be spoken. No unit names, no battles mentioned. Just mutual respect between men who had all known service, sacrifice, and the unspoken bond that came with it. "Appreciate you being here, sir," another SEAL said softly. "Sometimes people forget what it takes to raise a man who stands tall." Marcus gave a small, humble smile. He raised himself just fine. "I just tried not to get in his way." They shared a quiet laugh. Around them, the crowd relaxed again, but now with a different tone, one of quiet admiration. People who had stared before now seemed to nod in respect. A few even smiled politely at Marcus when their eyes met. And yet Marcus didn't let bitterness in. He had seen enough in his life to know that dignity didn't come from others' approval. It came from holding steady when others tried to shake you. Finally, the announcer's voice rang out across the field. "Aaron Thompson." The sound hit Marcus's ears like music. His chest swelled as he watched his son walk across the stage, head high, confidence shining through every step. Aaron shook the dean's hand, took his diploma, and turned to face the audience. His eyes found his father instantly. Marcus stood slowly, clapping, not loud, not showy, just proud. The 6 SEALs beside him rose too, standing tall, clapping in unison. Aaron's eyes widened slightly when he noticed them. He recognized the insignia on one man's lapel, the gold trident of the Navy SEALs. His expression softened with gratitude. After the ceremony ended, the crowd began to scatter. Families hugged, laughed, and posed for photos. Marcus stayed seated for a while, letting others pass. The SEALs remained nearby, not saying much, but staying close. Finally, Aaron made his way through the crowd, diploma in hand, smile wide. "Dad!" he called out. Marcus stood, his eyes warm. They embraced, a long, strong hug that carried years of unspoken pride and love. "I'm proud of you, son," Marcus said quietly. "Thanks, Dad," Aaron replied. "I'm proud of you, too." He glanced at the SEALs standing a few feet away. "Who are they?" Marcus smiled. "Brothers in arms, I guess. They stood up when it mattered." Aaron turned to them, extending his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for being here, for standing with my dad." The tall SEAL shook his hand firmly. "Your father stood for a lot of people long before today. We just returned the favor." Aaron's eyes softened. "Still, it means a lot." One of the other SEALs chuckled. "Your old man's got more respect than most people realize." Marcus shook his head modestly. "Respect's earned, not asked for." They all nodded. As they talked, a few people who had whispered earlier approached quietly. One woman spoke first. "Sir," she said gently, "I just wanted to say congratulations. Your son seems like a fine young man." Marcus smiled politely. "Thank you, ma'am." A man followed her, clearing his throat awkwardly. "And, thank you for your service," he added. "Didn't realize you were military." Marcus didn't let pride color his tone. "That's all right. I don't wear it on my sleeve anymore, but inside..." He felt a calm satisfaction. Not for being recognized, but for seeing how simple decency could change people's hearts without anger, without argument. The SEALs eventually prepared to leave. Before they did, the tall one, whose name Marcus later learned was Daniel, extended his hand. "If you ever find yourself in Virginia, sir, look us up. We'll take you out for coffee." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "You got it, son. Appreciate what you did today." Daniel gave a small smile. "Wasn't much. Just doing what's right." They nodded to Aaron, then turned and walked away in the same quiet, disciplined way they had arrived. As Marcus and Aaron stood watching them disappear into the crowd, Aaron turned to his father. "What happened, Dad?"
"Why did they come over?"
Marcus paused. He didn't want to repeat the words he had heard earlier. There was no need to bring bitterness into such a beautiful day. Nothing that matters now, he said softly. Sometimes the best thing you can do when people doubt you is to stay still and let your actions speak. Aaron nodded slowly, taking in his father's calm wisdom. They walked together toward the parking lot, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows behind them. Families laughed around them. Children ran between cars, and the air smelled of summer and pride. As they reached their car, Aaron looked back toward the field. "Dad," he said, "you always told me to keep my head high even when people don't understand me. I didn't really get it until today." Marcus smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You'll face moments like that, too. People will judge, sometimes for no reason, but you don't have to carry that. You just stand firm. The right people will see you." Aaron nodded, his eyes bright with respect. When they got in the car, neither spoke for a few minutes. The radio played softly, an old country song Marcus used to hum when Aaron was a boy. As they drove away from the campus, Marcus looked out the window, thinking about the 6 men who had stood up without being asked. It wasn't just about him. It was about something larger, about how honor still existed quietly in the hearts of good people. And deep down, he knew this moment would stay with Aaron forever. Not because of the whispers or the shame, but because of how calm strength and silent respect could change an entire day. The world was full of noise, arguments, opinions, judgments. But sometimes, the most powerful thing a person could do was exactly what those 6 seals had done: stand up, say nothing, let honor speak louder than words. The drive home was peaceful, the hum of the car engine mixing with the gentle music from the radio. Marcus sat behind the wheel, his hand resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Aaron sat beside him, quiet, lost in thought. The sun was setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. For a while, neither spoke. It was one of those silences that didn't need to be filled. Finally, Aaron broke it. "Dad," he said softly, "what they said back there, I saw the way some people looked at you." Marcus didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road. "You did, huh?" Aaron nodded. "Yeah, I heard a few things too. It made me angry." Marcus gave a small smile. "You know, son, anger's easy. It feels strong, but it fades quick. What matters more is how you hold yourself when it happens." Aaron looked down at his hands, remembering the way the 6 seals had stepped up, how the whole crowd went quiet. "I didn't know people could be like that," he said. "Both ways, the ones who whispered and the ones who stood up." Marcus nodded. "You'll meet both kinds all your life. The ones who tear down and the ones who lift up. You just have to decide which one you'll be." Aaron leaned back, letting those words sink in. He had always admired his father. His quiet confidence, his discipline, the way he seemed unshakable no matter what life threw at him. But today something changed. He didn't just admire him as a father. He respected him as a man who lived by his values, no matter who was watching. They reached home just as the first stars began to appear in the sky. The little house sat at the end of a quiet street, modest but neat, the kind of place that told stories of hard work and simple peace. Marcus parked the car and turned off the engine. "You hungry?" he asked. Aaron smiled. "Always." Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. Family photos lined the hallway. Pictures of Aaron as a boy, photos of Marcus in uniform, a folded flag in a glass case above the fireplace. Marcus headed to the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and began cooking something simple: eggs, sausage, and toast. He always said breakfast food tasted best at night. Aaron leaned against the counter, watching him. "Dad, how do you stay so calm? I mean, if that had happened to me." Marcus cracked an egg into the pan. "Because getting angry doesn't fix anything. It just gives the other person control. But don't you ever feel like you should say something?" Aaron asked. "Speak up?" Marcus looked at his son for a long moment before answering. "Son, speaking up doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes standing tall and staying quiet says more than shouting ever could. Today I didn't have to say a word. Those men saw enough to speak for me." Aaron nodded slowly. "Yeah, that was something. I'll never forget that." Marcus smiled faintly. "Neither will I." They ate dinner together at the small wooden table, the same one where Aaron had done his homework years ago. Between bites, they talked about his future, jobs, plans, maybe graduate school. Marcus listened carefully, occasionally giving advice but mostly letting Aaron talk. Later that night, after Aaron went to bed, Marcus sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock. He picked up an old photo frame from the shelf, a picture of himself in uniform standing with his old Marine squad. Some faces were gone now, lost to time and service. He remembered their laughter, the long marches, the nights under the open sky, and he thought about the SEALs, how they had shown up at the perfect moment without needing to know his name. He whispered to himself, "Some things never change. The uniform might come off, but the brotherhood stays." The next morning, Marcus woke early as he always did. The sun hadn't risen yet. He brewed a pot of coffee, stepped out to the porch, and sat down in his old chair. The cool morning air felt fresh and the birds were just starting to sing. He thought about what had happened, about how quickly things could shift, from shame to honor, from judgment to respect. It reminded him that every day still held lessons, even for a man his age. Around 7, Aaron came out, still sleepy, holding a mug of coffee. "Morning, Dad." "Morning," Marcus replied, smiling. "Sleep well?" Aaron nodded and sat beside him. They watched the sunrise in silence. After a while, Aaron said, "I was thinking about those guys yesterday." "The SEALs, yeah? I looked them up last night. The trident pin. It's no joke. Those guys go through so much to earn that." Marcus chuckled. "You did your homework." "Yeah, and it made me realize something. They didn't have to do what they did. They could have just ignored it." Marcus nodded. "That's true. So why did they?" Marcus sipped his coffee. "Because real strength doesn't stay quiet when it sees something wrong. It doesn't have to fight. It just stands up." Aaron thought for a moment. "You think I could ever be that strong?" Marcus turned to him. "You already are, son. You just haven't been tested yet. But when your moment comes, you'll know what to do." Later that week, Aaron got a call from a local newspaper. Somehow, someone at the graduation had filmed the SEALs standing with Marcus. The short video had quietly spread online, shared by veterans and families across the country. "Dad," Aaron said that evening, holding his phone, "you're going viral." Marcus frowned. "Viral, like a cold?" Aaron laughed. "No, Dad, it means people are sharing your story online. Look." Marcus took the phone and squinted at the screen. There it was, a short clip of him sitting calmly as the 6 SEALs stood beside him. Captioned, "Honor recognizes honor." He scrolled through the comments, hundreds of people thanking him for his service, praising the SEALs and talking about respect, unity, and brotherhood. Marcus shook his head with a quiet laugh. "Well, that's something," Aaron smiled. "You're kind of famous now." Marcus handed back the phone. "I'm not looking for fame, son. I just wanted to see you walk that stage." But that night, as Marcus lay in bed, he thought about it more deeply. Maybe it wasn't about fame. Maybe it was about reminding people that respect didn't have to shout to be heard, that the world still had people who stood for what was right, quietly, firmly, with dignity. The next morning, Marcus received a letter in the mail. It was from a retired admiral, someone he had once served under years ago. The letter was short but heartfelt. "Marcus, I saw the story. You always led by example. You did it again without saying a word. Proud of you, Marine." Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it next to the photo of his old unit. Later that afternoon, Aaron came home with 2 cups of coffee and a wide grin. "Guess what?" he said. "The university wants to feature us in their newsletter. They said what happened shows the true spirit of unity and respect." Marcus smiled. "You go ahead, son. I've had enough attention for one lifetime." Aaron laughed. "Come on, Dad, it's a good message." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "All right then. But make sure they know, it wasn't about me. It was about the good that still exists in people." That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Marcus and Aaron sat on the porch again. The light turned golden and a soft breeze moved through the leaves. "You know, son," Marcus said quietly, "life's full of noise. People arguing, judging, talking. But you don't have to answer all of it. Sometimes silence is your loudest voice." Aaron nodded, looking out at the horizon. "Yeah, I get that now." "Good," Marcus said, smiling. "Because one day you'll be sitting where I am watching your own kid do something great. And you'll remember this moment. You'll know what kind of man you want to be." Aaron turned to his father, his eyes full of pride. "If I turn out half the man you are, I'll be lucky." Marcus laughed softly. "Just be yourself. That's enough." As the sky darkened, a quiet peace settled over them. The day at the graduation felt far away now, but its lessons stayed fresh, like a mark carved deep into memory. The whispers that once tried to shame Marcus no longer mattered. What mattered was how he had stood, calm, proud, and unshaken, and how 6 strangers had chosen to stand beside him. It wasn't just a story about respect. It was a story about the quiet kind of courage that still lived in good hearts everywhere. And as the night settled in, Marcus closed his eyes, the sound of crickets filling the air, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a steady, lasting peace. The following days passed quietly in the Thompson home. Marcus went about his usual routine, morning walks, coffee on the porch, checking the mail, and helping his neighbor with small chores. He didn't think much about the video anymore. Life, he believed, was meant to be lived simply, not through screens and headlines. But the world outside hadn't forgotten him. The video of that small moment at the graduation had continued to spread. It had reached newspapers, online forums, and even news channels. It wasn't framed as drama or controversy. It was shown as a rare act of honor and unity. The story headline often read something like, 6 Navy SEALs silently stand beside a Marine at his son's graduation, a lesson in respect. People everywhere had been moved. Some wrote comments saying they had cried watching it. Veterans from all over the country began sharing it, saying it reminded them of what service truly meant. Brotherhood, not pride. Aaron was the first to notice how big it had become. He walked into the living room one morning with his laptop open. "Dad, you're on the news again," he said with a grin. Marcus looked up from his newspaper. "Again?" "Yeah," Aaron said, turning the screen toward him. "They're calling it the Walk of Honor. Look, even some schools are using it to teach about respect and unity." Marcus chuckled quietly. "I didn't do anything special, son. Just sat there and minded my business." Aaron shook his head. "That's just it, Dad. That's what makes it special. You didn't have to say a word. You didn't argue or get angry. You just stayed calm. And somehow that said more than anything else." Marcus smiled faintly. Funny how that works. Later that day, Marcus went to the grocery store. He liked going early before the crowd came in. As he was walking down the bread aisle, a woman approached him with a kind smile. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" Marcus blinked, a little surprised. "Yes, ma'am." Her smile widened. "I just wanted to say thank you. I saw your story online. My husband's a veteran too. What you did, it meant a lot to us." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. "I appreciate that, ma'am. Just doing what anyone should." She nodded and said softly, "The world needs more of that." Then she walked away. Marcus stood there for a moment, holding a loaf of bread, feeling humbled. He hadn't expected strangers to know his name, much less thank him. He never did anything for attention. He had simply lived by what he believed in. That evening, as he sat on the porch, the phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello?" he answered. "Mr. Thompson?" A voice said, "This is Commander Daniel Hayes. I'm one of the SEALs from the graduation." Marcus smiled instantly. "Commander Hayes, it's good to hear from you, son. How have you been?" "Doing well, sir," Daniel said warmly. "Listen, I wanted to tell you, the story got around our base too. The guys haven't stopped talking about it. We've had people writing letters even from overseas saying how proud they are to see something good for a change." Marcus chuckled. "Didn't think sitting quietly would get so much attention." Daniel laughed. "Sometimes the quiet moments speak louder than speeches. Anyway, we're planning a visit near your area next week. Thought we'd stop by if that's all right." Marcus nodded even though the man couldn't see him. "You're always welcome here. Coffee's on me." True to his word, a week later, a black SUV pulled up in front of Marcus's house. 6 men stepped out, the same ones who had stood beside him that day. This time they weren't in suits. They wore casual clothes, but the same calm strength showed in their posture. Aaron came out to greet them, shaking hands with each one. "You guys made quite an impression," he said with a grin. Daniel smiled. "Your dad did the real work. We just stood beside him." They all sat on the porch, drinking coffee and sharing quiet laughter. The conversation flowed easily, filled with stories of service, travel, and lessons learned. One of the SEALs, a younger man named Chris, looked at Marcus and said, "You know, sir, that moment taught me something important." I used to think strength meant being the loudest voice in the room. But watching you, it made me realize it's the quiet that really carries weight. Marcus nodded slowly. Noise fades. Character stays. Chris smiled thoughtfully. I'll remember that. They stayed for hours talking like old friends who had known each other for years. When they finally stood to leave, Daniel shook Marcus's hand again. Sir, you gave a lot of people something to believe in again. Thank you for that. Marcus looked him straight in the eye. We all just did what's right. That's all any man can do. After they left, Aaron turned to his father. Dad, I think you change more lives than you realize. Marcus smiled gently. Maybe. But if one person learns to do right because of it, that's enough for me. A few days later, the local community center invited Marcus to speak at a small event honoring veterans. He didn't want to at first. No, public speaking wasn't his thing, but Aaron encouraged him. Dad, people want to hear from you, Aaron said. You don't have to make a speech. Just tell your story. So, Marcus agreed. When the day came, he stood on a small stage in front of about 100 people. Most were veterans, students, and families. He wore a simple shirt and his old Marine pin. The room fell silent as he stepped up to the microphone. He looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and spoke in his steady, calm voice. I never expected to be here, he began. I'm not a public man. I'm just someone who tried to live quietly, with respect for others. He paused, letting his words settle. That day at my son's graduation, some people said things that weren't kind. But instead of getting angry, I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak, but because I knew who I was. And then something amazing happened. 6 men I didn't even know stood beside me. They didn't ask questions. They just showed respect. He looked around the room. That moment reminded me of something I learned in the service. Respect doesn't come from fear or loud words. It comes from character. From doing what's right when nobody's watching. People nodded quietly. Marcus smiled. I didn't share this story for fame. I share it because we live in a world that forgets sometimes. But I've learned that there are still good people. People who stand up quietly. People who choose kindness over anger. He ended simply. So if you ever see someone being treated unfairly, don't turn away. You don't have to fight. Just stand beside them. Sometimes that's all it takes. The room erupted in applause. Many wiped away tears. Aaron stood near the back, clapping proudly, his heart full. After the event, people came up to thank Marcus. Veterans, students, even children. One little boy, maybe 8 years old, tugged at his sleeve and said, Mister, I want to be brave like you when I grow up. Marcus knelt down, smiling kindly. You already are, son. Just remember, being brave doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means standing still. That night when Marcus got home, he felt a quiet peace in his heart. Not pride, just gratitude. He hadn't planned any of this. It had all started with one simple decision, to stay calm and be himself. Aaron joined him on the porch carrying 2 cups of hot tea. You know, Dad, he said, you always told me one person's actions can make a difference. I didn't really understand it until now. Marcus looked at his son. It's true. You never know who's watching, who's learning from what you do. That's why you do what's right even when it's hard. Aaron nodded. I think you've taught a lot of people that. Marcus smiled. Then it's been a good life. The night air was cool, the stars bright above. The sound of crickets filled the quiet space between them. And somewhere far away in bases and homes across the country, people who had seen that moment, that quiet stand of honor, were still thinking about it. Some shared it with their children. Others spoke about it at work or in classrooms. It became more than a story. It became a small reminder that dignity still existed in the world. Marcus didn't need to know how far the story reached. He didn't care about numbers or fame. All he cared about was that one lesson, the same one he had lived by all his life. When you stand tall, even in silence, the world listens. Weeks passed since the graduation, and life slowly returned to its normal rhythm for Marcus and Aaron. The quiet streets, the early morning walks, the familiar routine of coffee on the porch. All of it felt more peaceful now, almost like a reward for surviving a moment of unexpected tension with dignity. But the story of that day continued to ripple outward, in ways Marcus could never have imagined. Schools had begun sharing it as an example of character. Local newspapers had interviewed him. Even veterans he had never met wrote letters saying the clip had reminded them why they had joined service in the first place. Marcus didn't seek recognition. In fact, he still felt slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. But he understood something important. The story was no longer about him. It was about the idea that quiet courage, respect, and integrity could inspire people far beyond a single day. One morning, as Marcus poured coffee into his favorite mug, there was a knock at the door. Aaron went to answer it, and Marcus heard the familiar voice of Daniel, the SEAL who had first stood beside him. "Morning, sir," Daniel said, smiling. "We were in the area and thought we'd drop by." Marcus laughed softly. "You're always welcome." Soon, all 6 SEALs were seated on the porch, drinking coffee, exchanging quiet smiles. They talked about small things at first: the weather, Aaron's college plans, and old stories from their time in service. But soon the conversation shifted naturally. To the graduation, Daniel leaned back in his chair and said thoughtfully, "You know, Marcus, that day wasn't just about you or Aaron. It reminded all of us why we do what we do, why we serve, why we stand up when it matters." Marcus nodded. "I never thought about it that way. I just wanted my son to feel proud." Chris, the youngest SEAL, added, "That's the thing, sir. Sometimes people forget that small acts of courage are the ones that change hearts. Big battles aren't the only ones that matter. Today you and your son showed something bigger than any fight we've been in." Marcus looked at Aaron, who had been quietly listening. The boy had grown immensely over the past weeks. He seemed more thoughtful, more aware of the world, and more determined to live with integrity. Aaron smiled. "I think I understand now what you always told me, Dad. It's not about being the loudest. It's about being steady, about being who you are no matter what people say." Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Exactly. And you've already started learning that. Today you'll take it with you into your life. That's what matters." The SEALs stayed for a long time that day. They told stories of service, of small acts of bravery in unexpected places, of times when staying calm had saved lives. They laughed, sometimes quietly, sometimes openly, and the bond between them felt as if it had existed for decades. When it was time for them to leave, Daniel stood and looked at Marcus with a serious but kind expression. "Sir, it's rare to see someone carry themselves with such dignity. You've reminded us all that respect and honor are timeless. Don't ever forget that." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of the words sink deeply. "I won't. Thank you for being there. Not just that day, but for showing what it means to stand for others." After the SEALs left, Marcus and Aaron sat together on the porch in silence. The wind rustled the leaves, carrying the quiet sounds of a neighborhood slowly waking up. "Dad," Aaron said finally, "do you think people will remember that day?" Marcus took a sip of coffee, considering. Maybe, maybe not. But what they'll remember is the lesson. That's more important than the day itself. Aaron nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand. You stood tall without anger, and people noticed. But you didn't need to fight. That's the part that's really amazing." Marcus smiled softly. "Exactly. And that's how we change the world, son. Not with anger or shouting, but by staying true to our principles and helping others when we can." Over the next few months, the story quietly continued to grow. Schools invited Aaron and Marcus to speak about courage and respect. Local veterans groups hosted small gatherings, where Marcus was asked to share his perspective on integrity and service. He never claimed to be special. He simply spoke from the heart, sharing lessons from his own life and experiences. One day, a letter arrived at their house addressed to Marcus. It was from a young man named James, a high school student from across the state. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Thompson, I saw the video of you at your son's graduation. It made me think about how I treat people every day. I wanted to say thank you for showing me that standing strong with quiet courage can make a difference. You and your son have inspired me. Sincerely, James." Marcus read it carefully, then handed it to Aaron. "See, son, that's why this matters. One small act can touch a life you'll never meet." Aaron's eyes widened. "Wow, that's really something." It was a simple reminder for both of them. The ripples of respect traveled far beyond what they could see. One act of integrity could spread into countless others, slowly shaping a better world. The following weekend, Marcus and Aaron visited the local park. They saw families playing, children laughing, and veterans quietly walking with their dogs. Aaron looked around and said, "I think I understand what you meant about quiet courage. It's everywhere. You just have to notice it." Marcus smiled. "Yes, and when you notice it, you follow it. You learn from it. And one day you add your own ripple to the world." As the sun set, casting golden light across the park, Aaron looked at his father. I think I want to live like that. To be someone who stands for what's right even if no one notices. Marcus's chest swelled with pride. You already have that in you, son. Just keep it alive. That's all anyone can do. Months later, Marcus received another unexpected call. It was from the principal of Aaron's school. Sir, she said warmly, we want to start an annual award for students who demonstrate courage and respect inspired by your story. We'd like to name it after your son and you, the Thompson Courage Award. Marcus paused, feeling both humbled and emotional. I don't know what to say. That's an honor I never imagined. Just tell your story, the principal said. That's all it takes. The award ceremony was held at the school gym. Marcus and Aaron attended, sitting quietly in the front row. The principal gave a short speech about character, integrity, and standing up for what is right. And then the first award was presented to a young student who had quietly helped a new classmate feel welcome. Marcus felt a warm glow in his chest. It wasn't about recognition. It was about seeing values he held dear reflected in someone else. That, he thought, was the truest reward of all. Later, as he walked home with Aaron, the boy said, Dad, I never thought one day could change so many things. Marcus smiled. It's not about one day, son. It's about every choice you make. Every time you choose respect over anger, courage over fear, kindness over judgment. That's how change happens. Aaron nodded slowly, understanding at last. Then I'll try to be like you. Marcus squeezed his son's shoulder. You already are in ways you don't even know. Just keep going. Years later, when Aaron graduated from college and started his own career, he carried the lessons of that day with him. Quiet courage, respect for others, and integrity became the foundation of his life. He shared the story with colleagues, friends, and eventually his own children, teaching them that one simple act could inspire countless others. Marcus watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. He never sought fame. He never wanted attention, but he knew the truth. The courage to remain steadfast, the willingness to stand beside others, and the choice to act with integrity, even in silence, could echo far beyond a single moment. And in that echo, he saw the real power of honor, respect, and human kindness. As the sun set on the Thompson home, Marcus sat on the porch with Aaron. The world around them was full of sound and motion, yet they both felt calm. They knew the lessons of the past would guide them into the future, quietly shaping lives in ways that could never be measured. A legacy of honor, courage, and the strength to stand for what is right. Because in the end, it wasn't about the whispers or the shame or even the video that went viral. It was about one man who stayed calm, one son who learned from him, and 6 SEALs who chose to show respect. That small act of quiet courage had become a story of hope, inspiration, and the enduring power of integrity. And that story would live on, not in headlines, not in fame, but in the hearts of those who saw that true strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands.